Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Neho. Ho, ho. So, just so you know, my wife is from Hong Kong. She's Chinese. So yesterday I heard somebody call me a guaylo and he thought I didn't understand. And I caught him and he was embarrassed. So I know I'm a guaylo. It's okay. I'm a nice guaylo. So it is great to be here. My name is Seth Postell. I'm the Academic Dean of Israel College of the Bible. I actually grew up in a Jewish family in the United States. I moved to Israel when I was 22. And I went to Israel to find a Chinese wife from Hong Kong. God really loves me. So today's topic, we're going to actually be looking at how the Old Testament helps us to understand the New Testament. Just a quick question. Is there anybody here keeping time? Would somebody be willing to keep time? Yeah, so could you just, like 5 minutes or even 10 minutes before the end, stop me. Just let your alarm go off. I'll know it. And then I'll know that it's time for questions.
What time you want to stop?
Midnight.
I will be here.
I don't know when the symposium ends. Does anybody know? 4:45. Okay. So just 10 minutes before and let me know. So what we're going to be looking at is how the Old Testament helps us to... Oh, nowhere?
Excuse me, sorry.
No problem.
Hello.
I think it's ran out of battery.
It's out of batteries.
Let me
Okay.
just get you some.
No problem. Can I keep going? Or?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay. Can we pray? Yeah? Heavenly Father, thank you for the privilege of being with my brothers and sisters here in Hong Kong. Father, thank you that we are the one new man. Thank you for this amazing family through Christ. We commit this time to you and ask that you'd bless our time together. In Jesus' name. Amen. So if I speak loud, can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't need this actually. So I've always heard people saying that we need the New Testament to understand the Old Testament. So typically the way that people learn in churches or we learn in seminaries is that we have to learn the New Testament and then the New Testament brings us back into the Old Testament. Now, I do not deny that there is some truth there. And no doubt the New Testament sheds light on the Old Testament. But what I would like to suggest today in our study time is that if we are not serious readers of the Old Testament, we will miss many important connections in the New. I'd like to suggest to you that the New Testament calls Christians to be serious students of the Old Testament. So I hope by the end of our time today that if you love the Bible now, you will love the Bible even more. If you love to read the Bible now, you will love to read the Bible even more. And in fact, the greatest compliment I can ever hear afterwards is, wow, I can't wait to go home and read my Bible.
快返屋企咧再去睇聖經。
So in Acts 17:11, we hear about a group of people called the Bereans.
嗱，我哋喺《使徒行傳》17章11節嘅時候咧，睇到有一班係比利亞嘅人。
And when Paul preached in the synagogue, it said that the Bereans read and checked their Bibles to see if those things were so.
而保羅啊喺佢書信裏邊提及，就係話咧呢個比利亞人咧，佢天天查考聖經，要曉得這道是與不是。
Now, I am a lay pastor. One of the things I do is I co-pastor a small church.
我亦都咧係可以兼職嘅時間咧喺教會裏邊有講道嘅。
And I've got to tell you, when I'm preaching the Bible to people that don't have Bibles, it bothers me.
當我一路講解教導聖經嘅時候，但係原來會眾咧係冇聖經嘅，咁我就覺得唔係幾妥當。
Not in a religious sense, like I'm angry.
就唔係話好似嗰種咩嘅教條式嘅話，
But in-
都冇聖經我就嬲啦咁樣啊。
But in the sense that I would love for people to discover for themselves.
而我係好希望咧，大家係能夠自己查經、自己了解嘅。
I think when Christians don't read the Old Testament,
嗱，如果基督徒不睇舊約的話咧，
it's as if Paul is preaching a sermon. Hello. Hi. We got it. All right. It's as if Paul is preaching a sermon and we listen to his sermon with our Bibles closed.
就好似咧保羅一路講道，但係我哋聽講道嘅時候咧，我哋就冇打開本聖經嚟聽。
Okay. Jokes.
好啦，講笑話先。
I'm not going to tell any jokes because I know that it never works. Cross culture. I know that.
因為咧啲笑話通常都唔好笑㗎啦。
Okay? But I'd like you to think about jokes.
但係我想大家諗下笑話，
How do jokes work?
究竟笑話點解會好笑？
Oh, have you ever tried to tell a joke to a 5-year-old child?
你如果想像下同一個5歲細路仔講笑話會係點咧？
Right? He gets every word.
佢每個字都聽得明，
He understands the grammar. He understands the syntax.
明白個文法啦，
But he doesn't understand the joke.
但係佢唔覺得好笑，
Why not?
點解咧？
He understood everything you said.
每一個字佢都聽得明嘅喎，
How is it that he didn't understand the joke?
點解佢唔識得笑咧？
Okay? The way that jokes work is
係笑話點解好笑咧？
is that within a joke there are always clues that point you to a world outside the joke.
就係個笑話裏邊咧，一定有啲嘢咧提示你咧喺呢個世界外邊嘅一種嘅事物嘅。
So children understand all the words of the joke,
但係小朋友就了解笑話裏邊每一個字，
but they don't know enough about the world outside the joke.
但係佢並不了解呢個笑話指向外邊世界嘅事物。
And so they miss the clues that point you to another text, to a movie, to a book, to something funny.
所以佢哋捉唔到一啲嘅提示咧，就係話你係同一啲電影有關啊，同埋世界外邊嘅事情有關咧，佢係唔知道嗰啲事物。
I would like to suggest to you that in some ways the New Testament, it functions a little bit like a joke.
咁所以我想同大家分享第一點就係話咧，呢個新約福音有少少似一個笑話，佢係指向外邊世界嘅事物嘅。
In other words, the New Testament authors, many times they'll present something and they'll hint at a passage in the Old Testament.
好多時新約嘅作者佢一路講解嘅時候咧，佢會係引述舊約某一段嘅經文嘅。
And they're speaking to people that ought to know the Old Testament because it's the Word of God.
嗱，佢嘅會眾咧，理論上係應該要知道舊約嘅聖經㗎。
But if you miss the hints and clues, many times you miss the point of the New Testament author.
但係如果你係捉唔到啊嗰個新約聖經作者想引述嘅舊約嘅經文咧，其實你就係捉唔到個重點。
So I would like to suggest to you, we're going to, in the next few minutes, we're going to study the whole book of Matthew.
嗱，一陣間咧，我哋會睇整卷嘅馬太福音。
You set the alarm till midnight, right?
可以
Yeah.
坐到
The whole book of Matthew.
成卷嘅馬太福音。
All right? And what I hope to show you is that Matthew is presenting Jesus in light of the Old Testament.
嗱，我想同大家去分析嘅就係原來馬太福音嘅作者馬太係想咧係將舊約嘅聖經咧係向我哋介紹。
More to the point, that Matthew expects that his readers know the story of Israel in the Torah.
而且係更加具體啲講就係咧，馬太咧係期待咧佢嘅聽眾係了解摩西嘅五經嘅頭嗰五經
And
書。
the whole book of Matthew actually intentionally parallels the story of Israel in the Torah.
而其實馬太福音咧係可以同舊約裏邊嘅五經咧係可以話平衡咁樣嚟去比拼嘅。
Okay? So I'm going to try to show this to you and we'll see if I'm successful.
嗱，咁我試下咁樣係去做下，你睇下我成唔成功。
So whenever I teach Bible study, one of the things I always teach my students is to look for the structure of books.
嗱，當我哋去研經嘅時候，我有好多時都教學生就要睇下經卷嘅結構。
Now there's something very basic in structures.
嗱，結構有啲嘢係好基本，我哋要了解㗎。
Like a movie. A movie always has at least 3 parts.
嗱，好似電影咁，一定起碼有3部分：
Introduction,
引言啦、
middle,
中間部分啦，
conclusion,
同埋個結尾㗎。
right? And so when you watch a movie, you're always aware of when you're in the introduction, when you moved on to the action, and then when you've come to the conclusion.
所以當大家睇電影咧，你都留意到呢幾部分係咪啊？開始啦、中段同埋結尾。
Matthew has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
馬太福音亦都係咁，有3部分。
And I would like to look at the beginning, the middle, and the end, and I'm going to try to present it to you like I'm telling a joke.
嗱，咁我講嘅時候咧，就好似我講笑話咁樣樣啦嚇，會分3部分咁樣係去介紹呢個福音書。
And let's see if you get the joke.
咁睇下大家咧係識唔識得笑咯喎嚇。
Okay, so how does the Gospel of Matthew begin?
好，馬太福音開始嘅時候點樣講咧？
With genealogies, right?
就係大家知道係講個族譜啦。
Genealogies. Where else are genealogies important in the Old Testament?
舊約喺邊一度啊？都係族譜係重要㗎，諗唔諗得起啊？
Genesis.
冇錯啦，就係創世記啦。
Now here's what's really interesting. Matthew uses a Greek word, a Greek phrase in the very introduction of his gospel, the record of the genealogy of Jesus.
馬太咧就用即係希臘文咧係咁樣去講嘅，即係喺1章1節。
And that phrase is only found 2 times in the Old Testament.
而呢個句子啊，只係喺舊約裏邊咧係出現咗2次嘅啫。
In Genesis 2 and in Genesis 5.
就係喺創世記2章同埋5章出現。
Why are genealogies important in the book of Genesis?
嗱，點解喺創世記裏邊咧族譜係咁重要咧？
Doesn't God say he promises that through the seed of the woman would come redemption of the world?
聖經睇到就係話呢個女人嘅後裔咧就會帶嚟世界嘅拯救啊嘛。
The promise of the seed is very important in Genesis.
所以呢個後裔即係女人嘅後裔呢個應許咧喺創世記好重要。
And the chosen seed.
呢個係被揀選嘅後裔。
So the genealogies in Genesis actually lead us to the tribe of Judah in Genesis 49.
所以我哋咧係去到創世記49章嘅時候，我哋睇到呢個後裔係邊個咧？就係猶太一個嘅族裔。
But the language that Matthew uses when he begins his book, for any reader that knows the Torah, would immediately go back to Genesis.
所以每一個熟悉摩西五經嘅以色列人，當佢一睇馬太福音1章嘅時候咧，就會諗起舊約嘅經文。
What happens in Matthew chapter 2? Does anybody remember what happens in Matthew chapter 2?
好啦，馬太2章講咩嘢？大家記唔記得咧？
Jesus is born. You've got a wicked king
係啦，耶穌出世啦，當時嘅君王又殘暴啦，
who kills all the Hebrew babies 2 years and under.
想將所有希伯來嘅小朋友2歲以下咧都要殺晒。
Does this sound familiar to anybody?
大家聽過係咪？
Who is this? Pharaoh, Moses. Interestingly enough, Pharaoh sends the midwives to do his dirty work.
呢度我哋又諗起原來咧係法老咧就叫一啲嘅接生婆，同樣咧係咁樣係將以色列人嘅BB 咧係殺死㗎。
Herod sends the
但係希律就點咧？
the Magi
就將嗰
to do his dirty work.
佢哋嗰幾個嘅 術士咧就係去做呢啲咁樣嘅殺人嘅工作啦。
Okay, but think about the details. So Jesus has to flee, right? Joseph has to take Jesus, and where do they go?
嗱，咁我哋諗翻約瑟要帶同佢嘅家人，即係包括埋耶穌在內咧，要去逃亡啦。佢哋逃亡去邊啊？
Egypt, right?
去埃及啦。
And so then something very interestingly happens. In Matthew chapter 2, Matthew says that God brings Jesus out of Egypt to fulfill Scripture.
但係我哋睇到馬太福音第2章嘅時候啊，就原來上帝咧係呼召佢嘅兒子咧係從埃及出嚟。
Now, I don't have time to go into the quotation in Hosea.
嗱，我冇時間咧係引述何西亞書嘅一啲嘅經文添啦。
But I want you to think about this. In Matthew chapter 2, Jesus is brought out of Egypt.
喺馬太2章咧，耶穌就從埃及被呼召出來。
And there's a lot of language that's very reminiscent of Israel's story and Moses' story in the Pentateuch.
而呢個片段咧，亦都令到我哋諗起摩西五經裏邊好多出埃及嘅片段。
What happens in Matthew chapter 3? Does anybody remember?
好啦，第3章又如何咧？
Who shows up?
邊個出現啊？
John the Baptist.
有施洗約翰出現啦。
Why does John the Baptist show up?
點解佢會出現呢？
What does he do to Jesus?
佢同耶穌做咗啲咩嘢啊？
He does what? He brings him through the water.
將佢係帶過經過水係出到嚟。
So we have, interestingly enough, the beginning is just like the Torah.
所以開始嘅時候咧，都好似摩西五經嘅出現一樣。大家睇到下邊對應嘅章節咧，就係出埃及記第4章啊，同埋第14、15章呢啲嘅片段。
Jesus comes out of Egypt.
耶穌離開咗埃及啦，
Then he goes through the waters.
咁佢去到約旦河。
Does that sound familiar to anybody?
嗱，去到約旦河，咁大家諗起舊約出現咗咩事情啊？
The Red Sea.
過紅海啦。
Now I know you might be saying, Seth, this is a coincidence.
咁你可能會話 Seth 呢個係撞彩啫。
This is no. Come on, you're being a little bit too free with the text.
你太過自由咁樣係去解釋呢啲經文啊。
Can somebody tell me what's the next story in Matthew chapter 4?
好啦，咁第4章就出現咩事咧？
嚇
馬太4章
Temptation narrative. Where?
係喺邊度啊？就係耶穌喺曠野受試探咯。
Another coincidence.
係咪又撞彩咧？
Jesus goes out of Egypt through the waters, and now he's tempted in the wilderness.
咁啊，耶穌被聖靈引到曠野受魔鬼嘅試探啊。
Coincidence?
係咪又係咁啱得咁巧咧？
Here's what's really interesting. Luke has a different order to Jesus' temptation narrative than Matthew.
嗱，但如果你睇路加福音呢個受試探嘅次序咧，同馬太嘅次序咧係有所不同嘅。
Matthew's order of the temptation narrative is very interesting.
嗱，馬太嘅次序咧係好有趣。
It begins with a lack of food in the wilderness,
首先就話因為曠野裏邊冇食物啦，
then a temptation to test the Lord,
咁所以受試探咧就係睇上帝係咪俾食物嘅食。
and then finally a temptation for false worship.
最後咧就係一個虛假嘅敬拜啦。
Let me just suggest to you that that's exactly the order of Israel's temptation in the wilderness.
嗱，呢一個就正咧就係以色列人喺曠野受試探嘅次序。
A lack of food and water.
冇嘢食冇水飲，
They test the Lord,
佢哋就向試探上帝啦。
and then they finally bow down to the golden calf.
最後就向金牛下拜。
See, Jesus has come to be Israel's victor.
原來咧耶穌啊就可以話咧係代替咗以色列人，但只不過佢今次咧係勝利咗，以色列人咧係失敗。
Israel is Israel's redeemer.
你可以話耶穌就係以色列嘅拯救者，
He's also the redeemer of the world.
當然亦都拯救世界。
Okay, so you've got the genealogy
好啦，最先有族譜，
out of Egypt,
跟住從埃及出嚟啦，
through the waters,
經過呢個河啦，約旦河啦，
into the wilderness,
進入曠野。
where interestingly enough, he fasts for 40 days and 40 nights.
咁而又好有趣喎，佢係40天咧係禁食嘅，主耶穌。
Anybody else you know that fasted for 40 days and 40 nights?
仲有邊個係40天禁食啊？
Moses.
就係摩西。
But also in the temptation narrative, Deuteronomy chapter 8 is quoted all about God's testing of Israel in the wilderness.
而且喺申命記嘅第8章咧，亦都有講到以色列人咧係受到試探。
But all of this must be a coincidence.
咁係咪話所有嘢都係撞彩咧？
Until we come to Matthew chapter 5.
跟住睇馬太5章。
What happens in Matthew chapter 5?
發生咩事啊？
Jesus goes up the mountain,
耶穌上山，
brings some of his disciples with him,
帶咗啲門徒，
and he teaches them all about his law.
佢咧就去教導佢哋啦。
What do you think? Are we out of coincidence now? Are you convinced that this is a pattern?
嗱，你而家係咪信其實好似有一個模式喺度要跟住一樣咧？
Are you with me? This is a pattern.
係咪好似係有一個有跡可尋咁樣嘅發展落去㗎？
It gets better. It gets better.
嗱，其實你都未見到最精彩嘅嘢。
But my point is, I would argue that this is a clear example of needing to know the Old Testament to understand the New.
嗱，呢個就正正我開頭所講，我哋需要了解舊約嘅背景咧，以至到我哋更好嘅了解新約。
The body of the book of Matthew is divided around 5 discourses.
原來咧馬太福音咧可以係分咗5段嘅對話篇咧，係去作為佢嘅結構嘅。
Jesus delivers his teachings to his disciples in 5 large discourses in the center of the book.
即係話喺馬太福音嘅中段嘅時候咧，耶穌嘅教導可以分為5個部分。
Jesus is a teacher.
耶穌係一位老師，
And he's preparing disciples.
佢亦都係準備訓練門徒。
Now, this 5-fold teaching,
嗱，呢5部分嘅教導咧，
could this be a reference to the Pentateuch?
會唔會就係同摩西5經有少少關係咧？
Maybe.
或者啦。
But I want you to notice, do you want to read that in Chinese?
好，嗱，我哋
Yeah, you have
睇
a-
下馬太福音嘅5章嘅頭嗰1、2節啊。耶穌看見這許多的人，就上了山，既已坐下，門徒到他跟前來，他就開口教訓他們說。
So it's really interesting that Jesus goes to the mountaintop, and that's where he starts to give his instructions to his disciples.
嘢好有趣，我哋嘅觀察就係原來耶穌點解要上到去山度，然之後先至開口去教導門徒呢？
But I want you to notice something really interesting. The Great Commission is all about going and making disciples of all nations.
大家知道個大使命呢，就係我哋要出去將福音係傳到地極。
Teach them all that I have commanded you.
凡我所吩咐你嘅，都教導他們遵守。
Well, in the context of Matthew, that brings us back to the center of the book, the 5 discourses.
咁原來去到馬太福音嘅時候呢，就係去翻呢5個對話篇呢嘅其中一部分。
But what's really interesting is the first discourse is on the mountain.
原來第一個對話篇呢，就係喺山上嘅一個對話，登山寶訓。
And after each discourse, Matthew always includes this word. It says, when Jesus had finished.
而每一段完咗之後呢，馬太咁樣都記載就係耶穌講完了這些話。
When Jesus had finished, when Jesus had finished, when Jesus had finished, when Jesus had finished all these words.
嗱，喺呢度咁多篇，大家睇到11章、13章、19章、26章呢，都係話耶穌講完了這些話，耶穌吩咐完了12個門徒，耶穌說完了這些比喻，耶穌說完了這些話，耶穌說完了這一切的話，就對門徒說。
What's remarkable is that this phrase, when Jesus had finished all these words, appears in the Greek Torah in Deuteronomy chapter 31.
喺申命記31章咧，即係希臘文嗰個摩西5經裏邊咧，點樣去翻譯呢幾句説話咧？耶穌吩咐完了，耶穌説完了咧。
This phrase, when Jesus finished, it's a phrase that appears several times after Moses delivers his teachings.
原來呢一句説話咧，就正正係當摩西教導完之後咧，就有呢句説話出現。
The first discourse, which is a parallel to Mount Sinai, deals with the law.
第一段嘅對話篇咧，就同西乃山嘅教導咧係相關嘅，就係同律法有關嘅。
What does the last discourse deal with?
咁最後個對話係講咩嘢咧？
It's called the discourse on the what? The last days, the Olivet discourse.
就係呢個喺橄欖山嗰個嘅對話，就係耶穌最末後嘅階段嘅時候嘅對話。
Does anybody know what Moses' last discourse was about?
咁大家記唔記得摩西最後嗰段説話係關於咩嘢㗎？
What was Moses' last discourse about?
佢最後死前嗰個對話咧。
Somebody has an assignment. Can somebody here open up to Deuteronomy 31,
好，請大家打開
verse 29?
31章，申命記31章29節，申命記31章29節。
And if you can read that very loudly, somebody.
好，請在座邊位大聲讀出嚟。
Don't be shy.
好，呢位弟兄。
Here.
我知道我死後，你們必全然敗壞，偏離我所吩咐你們的道，行耶和華眼中看為惡的事，以手所作的惹他發怒。日後必有禍患臨到你們。申命記31章29節。
I do not know what's written in the Chinese,
我唔識睇中文啦，
but in the Hebrew, Moses says that you will forsake the Lord and evil will befall you in the last days.
而希伯來文嘅聖經就話你會忘記咗呢啲嘅教導，咁於是乎咧就有一個唔係幾好嘅結局，就喺最末後嘅日子。
The first time Moses goes up the mountain to give the laws.
嗱，第一次咧摩西上山咧就係頒布呢個律法。
The last time that Moses delivers teaching, he's speaking about the last days.
而最後嗰段説話咧，佢係講到末後嘅日子。
The first time Jesus gives his first discourse, he goes up a mountain and he speaks about the law.
而我哋見到呢個圖畫咧，喺主耶穌登山寶訓咧，亦都係咁樣出現。
The last discourse, he's speaking about the last days.
最後咧，亦都係講到末後嘅日子。
And he delivers his teaching in a five-fold structure to his disciples.
而佢向個門徒所講嘅説話咧，亦都分咗呢5個主要部分。
But all of this must be a coincidence,
咁大家係咪都認為都係撞彩咧？
right? To me, it's so clear
對我嚟講咧係好清晰㗎，呢個咁樣嘅對比。
that Matthew wants us to see important parallels between Jesus and Moses.
就係馬太呢位作者希望我哋睇到原來耶穌同摩西之間咧係一個好強烈嘅關係。
How does the gospel conclude?
好啦，福音書嘅結尾個結論係點樣咧？
Very interesting.
好有趣嘅。
The gospel concludes in Matthew 26 through 28.
我哋睇到馬太福音26至28章就係結尾啦。
Oh, sorry. Interestingly enough, after Jesus comes down the mountain from the Olivet Discourse, he has a Passover meal with his disciples.
咁我哋知道聖經嘅記載，當佢講完咧橄欖山嘅説話之後咧，佢落嚟同門徒一齊咧有一個晚餐。
And what does he do with them?
咁佢做嘅時候，佢點樣做咧？
After he delivers his instructions, what does he do with them?
佢教導完之後，佢做咩嘢啊？
He makes a new covenant.
佢有同佢哋立一個新嘅約。
And do you see this phrase here? For this is the blood of the covenant.
呢個就係我立約嘅血啊，係立約嘅血。
Does anybody know where that's from?
知唔知道係從邊度攞呢句説話出嚟㗎？
It's the exact words Moses used when he made the Sinai covenant with the people of Israel in Exodus 24.
原來咧就係喺出埃及嘅24章，摩西喺西乃山嘅時候講嗰個立約，就正正係呢句説話啦。
Just as Moses made the Sinai covenant,
摩西就有西乃山嘅約，
now Jesus is making a new covenant.
耶穌就立一個新約。
With how many disciples?
有幾多個門徒喺度啊？
With 12.
12個門徒，
Quite significant within the story of Israel, wouldn't you say?
係咪啊？12呢個數字同以色列嘅歷史當然好重要啦。
Interestingly enough, Yeshua then dies for the sins of his people. He rises again to give the Great Commission to his disciples.
我哋亦都知道馬太福音嘅記載，當主耶穌受難之後，佢復活之後咧，亦都係差遣門徒嘅。
Where is Jesus standing when he gives the Great Commission?
當佢差遣門徒呢個大
In Israel or outside of Israel?
喺邊度啊？喺以色列啦，因為以色列嘅境外啊。
He's in Israel, and what does he say?
喺以色列，佢講咗咩説話？
Go out.
你哋要去。
Which is so different than how the Torah ends.
呢度咧就同摩西五經嘅結尾好不同啦。
Where are the people of Israel when the Torah ends?
當摩西五經結尾嘅時候，以色列民喺邊度咧？
They're outside the land.
佢哋已經係離開咗。
And Moses says, go in.
而摩西就話：你哋要進入。
And so what we see here is a great commission that looks very much in some way like the inverse of conquering the promised land.
你可以話咧係啱啱同進入應許，即係大使命同進入應許咧，剛好係一個鏡面嘅一個相反。
So again, if we had more time, I would give you a lot more parallels.
嗱，如果我哋時間多啲咧，呢啲咁樣嘅對比咧，我會俾多啲例子大家嘅。
But to me, it's very clear that in order to understand the theology of Matthew, we need to be students of the Old Testament.
咁所以對我哋嚟講，樣嘢好清晰嘅，就係我哋要了解呢個新約嘅背景嘅時候咧，個結構嘅時候咧，我哋要了解舊約。
Now, what's interesting is not only what's similar between Jesus and Moses.
嗱，我哋留心嘅不單止係咧摩西同耶穌之間相似嘅地方。
In fact, what's more remarkable, it's what's different.
其實喺不同嘅地方咧，亦都係更加值得我哋注意。
Interestingly enough, and quite shocking.
嗱，有樣嘢真係令到我哋咧係好震驚喎。
When Moses goes up the mountain,
當摩西上山，
whose instructions does he give?
佢嘅頒布嘅訓令係邊個嘅訓令啊？
God's.
上帝嘅咯。
When Jesus goes up the mountain, whose instructions does he give?
但係當耶穌上山嘅時候，佢嘅訓令係從邊度嚟咧？
You've heard that it's said, but
嗱，你聽，
I say to you.
你聽見有話説，只是我告訴你們，呢個就係耶穌嘅講法。
At the end of the Torah, Moses says you can choose life and you can choose death, the two paths.
嗱，摩西五經結尾嘅時候咧，摩西就話：你哋可以選擇生命，可以選擇死亡，有兩條路可以俾你揀嘅。
Jesus finishes his teaching and you say you can accept my words and be established, or you can reject my words and be washed away with the storm.
同樣道理，耶穌亦都有一個嘅教導，就係話你可以接受我嘅講法，如果你亦都可以唔接受，就好似一個人建屋咧喺沙土上一樣。
Listen, this is quite startling that Jesus, in parallelism to Moses, is not giving God's law.
嗱，有樣嘢我哋知道好留意就係，當同摩西一路平衡嘅教導嘅時候咧，耶穌並唔係去講翻上帝嘅律法。
He's speaking as God.
而佢自己嘅説話嘅出發點就係佢好似自己就係神一樣咁樣去講説話。
Notice this amazing passage.
我哋留心睇呢個馬太福音11
This
章。
is the heart of the Gospel of Matthew and the heart of a call to discipleship.
呢個就係作為門徒訓練嘅重心，亦都係馬太福音嘅重點。
Could somebody read Matthew 11:28 through 30?
有冇邊位可以讀出嚟呢？可能大家都識背啦，係咪啊？
Any volunteers? Anybody want to be volunteered?
有冇邊位自願讀一讀出嚟？好。
Yeah? Can I give you the microphone?
馬太福音11章28節，凡勞苦擔重擔的人，可以到我這裏來，我就使你們得安息。我心裏柔和謙卑，你們當負我的軛，學我的樣式，這樣你們心裏就必得安息。因為我的軛是容易的，我的擔子是輕省的。
Thank you. Okay, I think sometimes without the Old Testament background, this passage won't shock us.
嗱，如果冇舊約嘅背景咧，呢段説話睇落去冇咩咁特別。
This passage is totally shocking.
但係呢樣其實係好
You
特別。
say, what are you talking about? This passage knocks me off my chair every time I read it.
我每次讀嘅時候咧，都真係令到我吃驚㗎。
What does Jesus say?
耶穌講咩啊？
Come to
係凡
me.
勞苦擔重擔，可以到我這裏來。
So think about all the parallelism between Moses and Jesus.
嗱，我哋諗到好多平衡嘅位咧，就係摩西同耶穌。
Put these words in Moses' mouth. Come to me and I will give you rest.
若果你將呢句説話放喺摩西嘅口裏邊講出嚟，即係摩西話：凡勞苦擔重擔，可以到我摩西嗰度嚟，你會有咩感覺啊？
If ever Moses said, Come to me and I will give you rest, that would be blasphemy.
如果摩西真係咁樣講嘅話，可以到我這裏來嘅時候咧，咁樣其實就係一個好無聊嘅説話嚟講。
If any prophet of the Old Testament ever said, Come to me and I will give you rest, that would be blasphemy.
若果任何一位嘅舊約嘅先知咁樣講話，有咩問題你可以嚟到我度咧？咁樣講其實都係講錯嘅，係褻瀆嘅。
He says, Come to me and I will give you. Sorry, what? Let's see here. He says, Come to me and I will give you rest.
你可以到我呢度嚟，我就使你得安息。
Take my yoke upon you.
可以負我嘅軛。
For years I didn't understand this. What does that mean?
喺好耐以嚟，我都唔係好明白呢句説話。
What is Jesus talking about? Take my yoke. What is my yoke?
耶穌講呢個軛要負嘅軛係咩嘢咧？
To make things easy, that's exactly how the rabbis of the day would speak about their laws, their traditions.
嗱喺當日嘅一啲嘅拉比老師咧，佢哋會講佢嘅律法傳統嘅時候咧，佢就會用呢啲説話。
Replace the word yoke with teaching.
如果我哋將軛呢個字取代咗，用我嘅教導嚟去代替佢。
Take my teaching and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my teaching is easy and my burden is light.
我哋可以將佢轉咗，就係話我嘅教導咧係容易嘅，我嘅擔子咧係輕省嘅。
Jesus is inviting his disciples. He's inviting them to come and be his students, his disciples.
原來耶穌喺呢個位咧，就係呼召人咧係去跟隨佢，做佢嘅門徒，係向佢學習。
But by virtue of the fact that Jesus is speaking about his law, by virtue of the fact that Jesus is saying, Come to me, what is Jesus saying about his identity?
但我哋要留心就係耶穌係話你要向我去學習，你要嚟到我嗰度。當佢咁樣講嘅時候，係顯示出佢係一個乜嘢嘅身份呢？
So, always in a joke, you've got the funny last sentence that opens the joke.
嗱喺講有個笑話，聽笑話嘅時候，最尾句説話最重要嘅。
So, I want to tell you about a guy by the name of Irving.
咁我講 Irving 嘅故事。
Irving is a friend of mine. He was an ultra-Orthodox religious Jewish man.
咁佢係我一個朋友啦，係非常傳統嘅一個猶太人。
Years ago in the 1980s, a young man of 16 years old got Irving's number and started calling him every week for a year to talk to him about Jesus.
嗱喺80年代咧，有位年輕人16歲嘅，每個禮拜咧就打電話俾呢個 Irving 咧，就傾一次電話咧係講關於耶穌嘅故事。
Irving had a photographic memory.
咁 Irving 咧佢嘅記憶力咧係驚人嘅。
He had memorized the Torah completely in Hebrew.
佢係能夠背誦咧整個5卷嘅摩西5經咧希伯來。
I have a hard time remembering John 3:16.
對我嚟講咧，要記約翰福音3章16節都有啲困難。
So every week for a year, this young man would call Irving and start to talk to him about Isaiah 53, about Isaiah 9, Psalm 22.
咁呢一個年輕人咧，每個禮拜打電話咧就會講下以賽亞書第53章啊，詩篇第9章啊咁樣樣。
And every week, Irving would refute his interpretations with the rabbinic interpretations.
咁呢個 Irving 咧，每一次咧都會係反駁翻呢個年輕人嗰個嘅詮釋，因為呢個 Irving 咧就會用摩西5經咧作為佢嘅基礎。
And this young man had agreed with Irving that they would not look in the New Testament. He did not want to see the New Testament when they began their relationship.
而佢哋兩位咧同意喺開始嘅時候就話咧，我哋係唔會睇新約聖經嘅。
After 1 year, they got nowhere. Irving was more convinced than before that Jesus cannot be the Messiah.
咁喺經過1年嘅時候咧 ，Irving 同呢個年輕人一齊嘅時候咧， 佢都係覺得呢個彌賽亞咧就冇可能係耶穌嚟嘅。
So one night, this young man calls Irving, and he's very nervous.
咁有一晚咧，呢個年輕人再打電話俾 Irving，佢自己咧就好緊張啦。
Irving?
講唔出咁滯。
What's the matter? I feel like I need to read something to you from the New Testament.
咁佢就同 Irving 講，佢話我要讀一啲新約嘅經文俾你聽。
Irving said, okay.
咁 Irving 話好。
So this young man read to Irving the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7.
咁呢個年輕人就將登山寶訓，即係馬太5至7章咧係讀出嚟。
Irving got the joke.
咁Irving 咧就明白啦，當堂明白晒。
As soon as this young man finished reading the Sermon on the Mount, Irving realized that Jesus is not only the Messiah, he's God in the flesh.
咁佢一讀完呢5至7章之後咧 ，Irving 就明白，原來耶穌不單止係應許嘅彌賽亞，佢更加咧係道成肉身嘅上帝。
28 years later, Irving is a pastor in New Jersey.
咁28年後咧 ，Irving 咧就係喺美國新澤西州咧做緊牧師啦。
In the story of Matthew, Yeshua is not only the prophet like Moses.
咁大家知道咧，原來咧喺新約聖經裏邊咧，呢一個耶穌不單止係好似摩西呢位先知咁樣樣。
He's Emmanuel.
佢更加咧係以馬內利。
You know what Emmanuel means?
大家知點解嗬？
God with us, right? Emmanuel. Interesting enough, the Gospel of Matthew begins with the naming of Yeshua. His name is Emmanuel, right? God with us. That's in the first chapter of the book.
以馬內利就係意思就係上帝與我哋同在。咁我哋亦都不忘咧喺馬太福音嘅第1章，耶穌嘅名亦都係被稱為以馬內利，上帝與我哋同在。
How does the gospel end? What is the last thing Jesus says to his disciples in Matthew 28?
好啦，咁馬太28章呢個福音結尾嘅時候，耶穌講咩嘢咧？
I am with you till the ends of the earth and the ends of time.
我必與你同在，直至到世界嘅末了。
Jesus is God.
耶穌係上帝。
All of this I get when I read Matthew in light of the Old Testament.
我點解得到呢個咁樣嘅消息呢個信念咧？就係當我睇馬太福音嘅時候，我一路諗翻起舊約聖經。
I would like to suggest that without reading the Old Testament, we miss so much in the New.
所以我想同大家講嘅就係話，若果我哋不認識舊約聖經嘅時候咧，我哋睇新約亦都係咧係會睇漏咗好多嘢。
How much time do we have?
報時。
Now it's 3:56.
And we have until what time?
4:45.
4:30.
4:30.
Okay.
仲有半個鐘頭。
It's hot in here, right?
大家係咪好熱啊？心裏火。
It's not hot?
Okay.
My wife used to say after a meal, "Fun, hey, gong some." But yeah, right. You get tired, right? Okay, it's okay. If you need to stand up and stretch or go out, and no problem, I'm not offended. My kids fall asleep on me all the time.
好，大家如果要起身嚇，好唔好啊？不如即係起身啦，唞一唞氣嚇。
I'm okay. Take a 5-minute stretch, okay? Get some water and then come back.
5分鐘，我哋小休5分鐘。OK。
Good job. You doing okay? Holding up?
Yes.
Great.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Thank
Good.
you.
Good.
Goisai.
You're welcome.
In Israel, if you give people 5 minutes, they usually take 15. Hey, Joe.
My friend Carmen.
Carmen?
Yeah.
Hi, Carmen. Nice to meet you. Welcome. Yeah.
We were in Japan together last week.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. How was it?
It was very surreal. That's how I can describe it.
Wow. You have to show us pictures.
Yeah, tonight we'll show pictures.
We'd love to see. Yeah.
So Carmen, our parents are coming alongside helping us with
with our project in Japan. She had been working with City to City Asia Pacific. So I was telling you about how this ministry with Tim Keller has helped, a lot of churches in Tokyo and Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And
He's had a huge impact on me, a huge impact.
You remind me how much they emphasize on reading the Bible from the redemptive historical perspective.
It's one story.
It's just one big
Exactly.
narrative.
Exactly.
And that helps me to see where we are right now.
Exactly.
And so it's like, it's just rooted in the
praise
very...
God. Yeah. No, it's exactly it. If you learn to read the Bible as a single book, it's like you can't watch a movie. You can't watch parts of a movie. You have to watch the whole movie to understand any of the parts of the movie.
And each part reinforces each other.
Exactly. If you're not reading whole books and the whole Bible, you miss the story. And then many times what ends up happening is you go, and Timothy Keller really shows this, you end up going towards a doctrine of works, where suddenly you have to work to please God. You have to do, as opposed to this redemptive story that leads us to rest in Christ. So, you're welcome. Thank you, Carmen. Great to meet you.
Me too.
Yeah.
So Natalie is going with her cousin to watch the latest Avengers movie tonight.
Yeah.
But the only problem is that Natalie has only watched Iron Man, so she hasn't watched Infinity War.
It's not gonna make any sense.
Everything else.
It's gonna make any sense.
And so now she's catching up on YouTube with they're like these people that come up with like a 3-minute synopsis of each movie, and she's trying to grab bits and pieces so that she'll be able to understand the movie that she's going to watch this evening.
You've given the perfect illustration of what it, for Christians to just read the New Testament is like watching Endgame and maybe having read, like Iron Man, maybe parts of Genesis.
Yeah.
And so you're watching Endgame and you think, I don't get it, Or worse, you think you get it and you twist it. So there's a perfect illustration. Wow. I took my children to see that last week.
Oh, really?
Endgame. It was fun.
Don't tell me.
I had nothing. No spoilers here.
I was quite upset after Infinity War.
That's an upsetting movie.
Yeah. Like half of my favorite heroes are all gone.
Exactly. I say nothing. My boys, I hate when my boys see movies before me, especially the older one. He's kind of a mischievous, and he'll throw something in. He's like, oh! Well, good. I think we can start going again. What do you think? Oh, hello. I lost my translator. He ran for the hills.
Remember we met in Israel.
You are very familiar to me. What is your name?
David Wong.
That's right. Yeah. Hey, David. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm Darling. She went as well.
Hello. How are you?
Israel?
Yeah.
You came to the college.
Correct.
Yeah.
We went there twice. We went to Israel twice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. Nice to see you again.
But now you're based there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Just came to visit, and I love Hong Kong. My wife being from Hong Kong, I feel at home here.
Okay, cool.
I love Hong Kong.
And you love the food, right?
But
I do.
But you don't spend time here, though.
The people I love more. There's something about Hong Kong, whenever I hear Cantonese, it just warms me. Like I can't explain it, but it's home. I hear my wife speaks to my daughter in Cantonese, so there's just something.
Okay, that's good.
Cantonese sounds beautiful too. I can't do it. The tones are too difficult.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, I think.
All right, I think I left out. Let's see.
Catch over here.
Is there a translator in the house? I could start in Chinese. Ngo Giu Pun Se Fu. Yao Qing Yam Soi Bao. Wow. Some jokes. I learned a long time ago that you never tell jokes cross-culturally. They never work, ever. No. So I'm an immigrant to Israel. I immigrated to Israel in 1993. So I speak fluent Hebrew, very good Hebrew, but when native-born Israelis start telling jokes, I never get what they're saying. Because they grew up with all the movies and all the culture and yeah. So I'm trying to think how we can do this. I really don't know any jokes. Is there somebody here that needs translation? Yeah, here he comes. Okay. Oh, here he comes. Mganyu. Moisi. Womantai.
Okay, please continue.
Yeah, you want to sit? You're welcome to sit.
I'm okay.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I want to do is I want to just show you another very familiar story. And show you once again that without knowing the Old Testament, you actually miss the point of the story. And in fact, I heard a really good analogy right now to what it's like to read the New Testament without the Old Testament. I've got young boys. They like the Avengers. What did you say?
Sorry. OK， 嗰個 Avengers 嗰啲咩隊長啊，復仇者聯盟啊，復仇者。
Yeah. So,
OK。
Anybody want to hear how Endgame ended? No, I'm joking.
I won't be able to interpret that.
No, that's fine. So there's all these movies of the Avengers. And you always need the last movie to watch the next movie. And you always have to sit in the movie theater till the very end because after you get all the credits, there's always a clip that prepares you for the next one. So Carol was telling me how her daughter is going to see Endgame this evening.
Carol 就話俾我聽，佢今晚點解會去睇 Endgame 係嘛？
But her daughter, before that, had only seen Iron Man.
但係之前咧就係佢太太係嘛，佢個女就淨係睇過鐵甲奇俠係嘛？
You were doing really good until we got to the movies.
Thank you. I take that.
So she's now trying to catch up.
咁佢要追翻咧，睇下啲電影係講啲咩嘢啊咁啦。
In order to watch Endgame.
咁啊，所以先至睇 Endgame 先至睇得明啊嘛，係嘛？
The New Testament is Endgame.
嗱，咁原來新約咧，你可以當佢咧係一個 Endgame，即係一套電影系列嘅比較後期嘅。
Genesis is Iron Man.
咁啊，創世記咧就係呢個鐵甲奇俠啊，係。
But you need all the other movies to make sense, at least complete sense of Iron Man.
但係你亦都要真係睇晒，你先至明咧鐵甲奇俠係講咩嘢。
Does that make sense?
Yes. 呢個比喻。
Now listen, I am not saying that a Christian who doesn't know the Old Testament cannot be saved.
嗱，我並不是話咧，如果一個基督徒佢不認識舊約咧，佢就不能被拯救啦。
I'm not saying that a Christian who doesn't know the Old Testament doesn't love Jesus and love the gospel.
嗱，我並不是講緊，如果一個信徒佢不認識舊約咧，佢就不愛上帝啊，不認識福音啊，我絕對唔係咁樣講。
But I am saying that as we grow in our love for Jesus, we want to understand him as best as we can.
不過我想講嘅就係話，當我哋真係認識、想去學習、想去愛耶穌、跟從耶穌嘅時候，我哋應該盡量係對佢了解更多。
And so our love for Jesus takes us back to the book that helps us to understand who he is.
所以我哋當認識主耶穌、想認識主耶穌嘅時候，我哋一定要再睇翻一啲嘅書卷，係令到我哋認識佢更多嘅。
So Mark chapter 4 verses 36, or actually 35 through 41.
我哋而家咧睇下馬可福音呢度嚇第4章36至到41節嘅。
Can somebody read this passage for us?
嗱，又想在邊一位同我哋讀一讀？
And I want you to listen for the joke.
咁你一路聽嘅時候就睇下嗰個笑話，嗰個最重要嗰個説話。
As this passage is being read, please tell me if this sounds at all familiar to you from the Old Testament.
會唔會令到你諗起舊約嘅一啲經文？
Who's going to read?
邊位讀一讀馬可福音？係。
Thank you. So you remember your homework. You have to listen and see where this is from.
好啦，大家要記住嚇，要聽一聽，令到你諗起舊約係講緊咩嘢。
門徒離開眾人，耶穌仍在船上，他們就把他一同帶去，也有別的船和他同行。忽然起了暴風，波浪打入船內，甚至船要滿了水。耶穌在船尾上枕着枕頭睡覺。門徒叫醒了他，說：夫子，我們喪命，你不顧嗎？耶穌醒了，斥責風，向海說：住了吧，靜了吧。風就止住，大大地平靜了。耶穌對他們說：為什麼膽怯？你們還沒有信心嗎？他們就大大地懼怕，彼此說：這到底是誰？連風和海也聽從他了。
OK。
Good. Okay. Microphone. All right. Does this story sound familiar to anybody?
呢個故事大家有冇諗起啲咩嘢啊？
Thank you. This is the story of Jonah.
呢個就係約拿嘅故事啦。
Kind of.
有啲似啦。
It is very clear that the way that Mark records the stilling of the storm, he's using Greek phrases from the Greek story of Jonah.
原來當馬可寫呢段，佢用希臘文寫嘅時候咧，佢亦都係諗翻起希臘文嘅約拿書嘅片段。
Let me just suggest that Mark chapter 4 is a riddle.
嗱，我可以咁樣講，馬可福音4章可以係個謎語嚟嘅。
It's a riddle because it ends with a question that the reader has to answer.
點解個謎語咧？就係因為佢最尾嗰段咧係問緊讀者，你又係要去回答呢個問題嘅。
Look at verse 41.
睇41節。
Who then is this?
這到底是誰？
That even the wind and the waves obey him.
連風和海也聽從他了。
It's amazing that Mark actually doesn't give us the answer directly.
嗱，我哋要留意就係馬可冇直接提供個答案，佢淨係提咗個問題啫。
But the answer is absolutely there for those who know the Old Testament.
認識舊約嘅人咧，個答案係呼之欲出。
Notice, in Mark 4:37, there's a great wind and waves filling the boat that the boat starts to fill up.
我哋睇到馬可福音4章37節講到咧係有大風浪，而且個船咧係滿咗水。
In Jonah 1:4, there's a storm on the sea and the ship starts to break apart.
而約拿福音1章4節咧就講到起咗大風，海就狂風大作，甚至船咧幾乎要破壞。
Notice in 4:38, Yeshua, Jesus is sleeping.
嗱，呢度馬可福音講到耶穌係瞓緊覺嘅喺船上。
And the disciples come to wake him up and they say, "Don't you care that we're perishing?"
咁門徒咧就要叫醒佢話：夫子，我們喪命，你不顧嗎？
Jonah is in a storm.
嗱，約拿亦都係喺個風暴裏邊。
Where is he?
佢喺邊啊？
瞓覺。
瞓緊覺。
Hoi瞓覺。
係啦。
Right? He's sleeping. And what's interesting is that the captain comes and wakes him up and says, "Don't you care that we're going to perish?"
咁嗰個船主就對佢講：你這沉睡嘅人啊，為何這樣？
Interestingly enough, the disciples are fishermen.
咁又好得意就係咧，原來門徒係漁夫嚟㗎。
And they're scared to death on the water.
但係佢哋喺海上面都一樣係好驚。
The sailors, they're sailors and they're scared to death on the water.
另外嘅片段咧，嗰啲係水手嚟嘅，佢哋喺水上邊。
Don't you care? Don't you care that we're going to perish?
但係佢哋係驚到話係怕得要死。
Notice Jesus gets up, rebukes the wind and the sea, and says, "Hush, be still," and the wind dies down immediately.
咁喺新約嘅時候，耶穌就話住了吧，靜了吧，咁啲風就大大地平靜。
In the Jonah story, they pick Jonah up, throw him into the water, and the sea stops raging.
咁喺約拿嘅時候咧，就係啲船夫咧就將約拿抌咗落海，咁有啲風浪就停啦。
I always think that this is a punishment on Jonah because he loved sushi.
約拿中意食壽司咧，就係上帝懲罰佢咧。
He was swallowed by a giant sushi.
因為佢俾個大壽司吞咗啊嘛。
Okay? So, I want you to notice something quite spectacular.
好，我哋有一樣嘢要留意嘅。
It says that they feared a great fear and were saying to one another, "Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?"
佢哋係大大地懼怕，就彼此說：這到底是誰？連風和海也聽從他了。
Notice how the story of Jonah ends. It says that the men feared a great fear.
但係喺約拿書亦都有平衡嘅句子喎，就係話佢哋係好驚嘅。
The Lord,
係驚邊個咧？
and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows.
咁就係向上帝咧係去獻祭嘅。
Now the word here, capital L-O-R-D, in the Hebrew text is the name of God, Jehovah.
大草嘅 L-O-R-D， 即係喺原文咧就係講到耶和華嘅名。
Did you like that? I do that again. Here, let's just wait. I worked hard on that, so here we go. See that? Okay.
You are a high-tech guy.
I know the Chinese invented fireworks.
中國人發明
Right?
You are half Chinese.
Exactly. I want you to notice what's really amazing here.
好，有咩咁特別咧？
These pagan sailors recognize God, they recognize the Lord, and so they worship Him.
呢啲咧係非猶太裔嘅船夫啊，但係佢哋因為睇到呢個神蹟嘅時候咧，都知道呢一個係真嘅上帝。
These Jewish disciples have no clue who's in the boat with them.
但係調翻轉頭啊，呢啲本來係猶太人嘅門徒咧，反而唔知道船上嘅耶穌係邊一位。
But think about this. These stories are parallel, right?
嗱，但係我哋要諗呢啲係平衡故事，係咪？
But many times the punchline is not in how the stories are similar, but in how the stories are different.
但係好多時個重點咧就唔係話兩個故事相似嘅地方係乜嘢，反而係佢哋嘅不同之處。
Who calms the storm in Jonah chapter 1?
嗱，喺約拿書嘅1章，邊一個平靜風浪啊？
The Lord.
係上帝。
In Hebrew, Yud He Vav He, it's the name of God. The Lord stops the storm.
係上帝或者上主係平靜咗風浪。
Who stops the storm in Mark chapter 4?
但係喺馬可4章咧，邊個平靜風浪啊？係耶穌。
Who then is this?
係邊一個咧？這到底是誰？
Who is this?
係邊一個嚟咧？
Listen. I've heard many times people say that the Gospel of Mark has a very low Christology, the Gospel of John has a high Christology.
嗱，我哋聽好多時有人講咧，就係馬可福音咧係將呢個基督嘅位置咧係放得比較低，反之咧約翰福音就將基督嘅位置咧係提升。
You could not have a higher Christology than this.
但係其實啊，最高嘅一個所謂嘅基督論咧，喺
Why?
福音嗰度就有出現。
Because Jesus is parallel here to the Lord Himself.
因為喺呢一個位啊，耶穌就被比作上帝本身。
And another piece of information that's very relevant,
仲有一個相關資料。
if you look in the Old Testament,
我哋如果睇舊約，
rebuking the sea and stilling storms is an exclusively divine act.
能夠平靜風浪咧，係單咧係上主先至有能力咁樣做。
Only God in the Old Testament can still storms, control waves, walk on the sea. It's only God.
喺舊約裏邊，只有上帝一個人，一位上帝先至能夠平靜風浪喺水上邊行走嘅啫。
So without the Old Testament,
所以如果冇咗舊約背景，
Mark leaves us with the disciples' question, who then is this, that even the wind and the waves obey him?
有個問題我哋就答唔到啦，就係話呢一個到底是誰，連風和海都聽從佢。
Without the Old Testament, let me just simply say that you don't have the right equipment to solve the riddle.
或者用咁樣嘅講法，呢個謎語，如果你冇一個舊約嘅背景咧，你係解決唔到呢個謎語，答唔到呢個問題。
You could say he's the Son of God, which is true.
嗱，你可以話佢係上帝之子，呢個都係啱嘅。
You could say he's one of the avengers, which is not true.
你話佢係其中一個復仇者，咁呢個係唔啱啦。
But even by saying the Son of God, we've sometimes grown accustomed to hearing that as less than God.
好多時，如果我哋聽到話耶穌係上帝之子，有時我哋會覺得耶穌都係次於或者係次等嘅，冇上帝係平排。
Even though the triune God, Father, Son, and Spirit are equal.
雖然我哋其實了解到喺聖三一裏邊，聖父、聖子、聖靈嘅位置咧係等同嘅。
But this passage is abundantly clear that Jesus is completely equal with the Lord, Yahweh of the Old Testament.
但係呢一段經文俾我哋睇得好清楚，耶穌咧就等同舊約嘅上主，舊約所講嘅耶和華上帝。
Interesting passage. Just you can take a picture of it. You can read it after.
大家可以影咗佢之後再讀啦。
This is an amazing passage about the Lord stilling a storm in the book of Psalms.
講到詩篇107篇啊。
And it's so clear that Jesus, on the basis of this passage, is God Himself.
而我哋咁樣睇嘅背景，我哋知道耶穌本身就係上帝。
All right. So Jesus, from Mark chapter 4, we discover is
好啦，從馬可4章我哋睇到耶穌係邊一位咧
God.
就係上帝。
Without the Old Testament,
但如果冇舊約咧
we're left guessing.
我哋就要靠估啦。
Does that make sense?
係，希望大家聽得明白。
I could give you other examples.
我仲有第啲例子嘅。
And I'm not going to go through them. I'm just going to list a couple of examples.
淨係舉一啲例啫啊。
Do you know that the book of Revelation parallels the Exodus story?
大家知唔知道原來咧啟示錄同出埃及記都係有關聯咧
Jesus' primary identity, or one of the major ways that John presents Jesus in Revelation, is the Lamb.
係因為喺約翰喺啟示錄咧就將主耶穌係等同呢個羔羊。
What does God pour out on the nations to rescue His people?
係啦，就係上帝用羔羊咧係去拯救。
Plagues. In the book of Revelation, they're singing the song of Moses.
亦都同樣喺啟示錄裏邊係有摩西之歌嘅。
Without the story of Exodus, I miss the impact of the story of the future in Revelation.
如果我哋冇舊約出埃及嘅背景咧，我哋睇啟示錄嘅時候，亦都係缺乏咗對未來嗰個嘅一個了解。
In Mark chapter 1 verse 6, it says that John the Baptist is dressed in like a leather belt and certain kind of garments.
嗱，馬可1章6節咧講到施洗約翰嘅服飾咧，就係作為着一件皮有毛衣啊咁樣咧，其實就係
There's
同舊約
only one other person in the whole Bible that's dressed exactly like that.
唯一一個似佢咁樣嘅衣着嘅人咧，喺舊約就係以利亞。
Elijah. John the Baptist is clearly coming as Elijah, a major Old Testament theme.
所以我哋可以睇到，其實施洗約翰就係好似舊約裏邊講呢個以利亞先知一樣咧，咁樣係嚟到出現咗。
On the Mount of Transfiguration, when Peter and the disciples see Jesus transfigured,
好，我哋睇到喺變化面貌嘅時候嚇，門徒睇到耶穌。
do you remember what Peter said?
彼得講咩嘢咧？
Shall we build you 3 booths?
我哋要起3座棚。
Why?
點解咧？
You ever think about why?
點解彼得咁樣講咧？
Well, interestingly enough, Jesus at the end of Matthew chapter 16, he says, there are those of you here that will not taste death until you see the Son of Man coming in His glory.
喺馬太16章，耶穌繼續講落去就話，有人喺死之前咧，都會見到即係人子嚟嘅榮耀。
Then in the Mount of Transfiguration, they see Him coming in His glory.
咁喺變化面貌嘅時候咧，就正正見到啦呢個景象。
And they're convinced that Jesus is about to set up his kingdom.
咁佢哋就以為耶穌係會喺呢度咧係建立佢自己嘅王國。
And in Zechariah chapter 14, when the Lord comes back in his glory,
喺撒迦利亞14章，即係當主回來嘅時候
what are the nations supposed to celebrate?
咁各國民係要慶祝咩嘢咧？
The Feast of Tabernacles.
就係嗰個住棚節啊。
In Zechariah 14 says, when the Lord returns and steps on the Mount of Olives and it splits, and then all the nations will come up to Jerusalem to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles.
去到呢個橄欖山嘅時候，即係主再來嘅時候咧，咁每一個各族各民咧都會嚟到咧，就係去慶祝呢一個住棚節。
And so here we have several other examples of why it's so important to be reading the Old Testament.
所以呢度都係幾個例子啦，就係睇到舊約嘅背景咧，幫我哋了解新約。
So conclusion.
好結論。
And then we can take some questions.
跟住就有啲答問嘅時間。
Number one.
第一。
I don't think we can ever truly get all the jokes in the New Testament without becoming students of the Old Testament.
如果我哋不認識舊約，我哋未必能夠係完全認識新約。
We want to get to know the Old Testament to understand Jesus.
所以要了解舊約，我哋先至能夠完全了解基督。
So when I met my wife, I met her in Israel.
我認識太太嘅時候咧，係喺以色列嘅。
I knew nothing about Hong Kong.
我對香港一無所知。
When I was a kid, my toys were made in Hong Kong. That's all I knew.
玩嗰啲玩具咧就係香港製造嘅。
I just knew I was in love with this Chinese girl from a place called Hong Kong.
我淨係知道呢個女仔係來自香港，我好喜歡佢。
And I got the best advice before our marriage that I'd ever gotten.
咁我哋結婚之前咧，有人咁樣提醒我。
You will never understand your wife unless you come and live in Hong Kong.
如果你唔嚟香港住下咧，你都未必能夠了解你太太。
And so I moved, before we were married, I moved to Hong Kong, and I lived in one room with my mother and father-in-law in Ao Tau Kok.
咁所以咧，我喺後來有機會喺牛頭角同我父母一齊住喺一間房。
Ling went to be with her sister, and I stayed in the same room with her mother and father.
咁我that's your wife in another room?
She went to stay with her sister in another apartment, and I stayed with her mother and father in one room in government housing for 3 months.
咁我太太咧就同佢嗰個姊妹咧就一齊住，我咧就同我太太嘅父母就一齊住咗3個月。
I was the only Guaylo in all of government housing.
喺呢個所有嘅呢個政府嘅屋裏邊咧。
Batlao. And her parents don't speak any English. And so every morning her mother would say, "How are you?" And that was it. And her mother was a devout Buddhist, so every day she would go to the market and bring fruit and put it on the altar and burn incense. And then the first time I was supposed to go and take a shower, and I was given a towel that was this big. And I had hardly any room in the shower, and I kept getting my clothes wet. And then they gave me red bean soup, and I thought it was just, at first I was shocked that soup is sweet instead of salty. And then the first time I smelled durian, I thought that the cats did something on the road. But for 3 months, I got to know my wife's background.
咁3個月嘅時間，我了解我太太來自香港，香港嘅背景係如何。
For 3 months, I got to know my wife's culture.
咁我就認識我太太嘅文化。
And that has aided me in our whole marriage, 20 years married, and I understand, maybe not completely, but I understand where my wife's from, sometimes why she does the things she does, how she acts.
咁幫助我哋有20年嘅婚姻啦，了解佢嘅背景，點解佢咁樣去做事嘅方法咁樣。
It's also given me a greater love for my wife.
當然亦都令到我更加愛我太太。
That's what it means to read the Old Testament for Christians.
嗱，對於基督徒嚟講，我哋睇舊約咧都可以有類似嘅一個比喻嚇。
We want to understand our Savior.
我哋想了解我哋嘅救主。
We want to understand the things He does, the things He says.
想了解佢嘅行為，佢嘅教導。
You can't do that without the Old Testament.
咁如果唔了解舊約咧，咁就係即係有少少嘅缺乏啦。
Secondly, I believe that we need to receive the testimony of the New Testaments like the Bereans received the testimony of Paul.
嗱，我哋咧就要學習喺新約裏邊《使徒行傳》記載咧呢個比利亞人咧，佢點樣係去研讀聖經，咁就好似我哋咧就而家要學習。
When you study the New Testament, you should always have the Old Testament in hand.
我哋睇新約嘅時候，一定要準備睇埋舊約。
You're not questioning what the New Testament says.
並唔係話去質疑新約所講嘅嘢係真或假。
You're not trying to deny its authority.
又唔係話去否定新約嘅權威。
You're just simply wanting to understand it better.
只不過係想更加透徹去了解新約聖經啫。
And we don't need to read that. Okay. Are there any questions, comments, thoughts?
好，有冇問題或者回應呢？
Yes.
Does it mean that we need to draw a parallel between every New Testament passages with the Old Testament?
You want to translate?
There be a chance of over spiritualizing.
Yes. Read the question.
She can do it for herself.
You want to translate? Go ahead.
我哋想問係咪每一段新約聖經都要揾翻舊約嗰個即係平衡啦，同埋會唔會過分屬靈化咗舊約嘅經文咧？
This is an amazing question.
問得好。
And so, the way that jokes work is that within the joke of the New Testament, there's certain signs. Not in the New Testament, sorry. When somebody tells a joke, there's certain literary, linguistic signs that point you somewhere else.
就係當我哋睇一個笑話嘅時候咧，其實佢有啲文學嘅修辭嘅手法咧，係指向外在嘅事物嘅。
So basically, there are many rules, but there are three very important rules when you think you've seen a parallel.
嗱，有3個規矩我哋可以留意嘅。如果你見到要有對比啊平衡嘅時候。
Because you really are after authorial intent, not your creativity.
嗱，最重要就係了解嗰個作者嗰個嘅動機。
So there are 3 interpretive rules that scholars follow, and I think others should follow.
所以當我哋去詮釋聖經嘅時候咧，我哋要跟隨呢啲規矩。
One, is there unique shared language between the two texts?
喺嗰兩者之間有冇獨特嘅共用嘅語言？
In other words, by the words that the New Testament uses, are they using certain words and phrases that are specifically found in an Old Testament passage?
即係話新約作者佢用字咧，有冇引述舊約聖經好獨特嘅字眼？
If there are no literary or linguistic contact between two texts, then my rule of thumb is even if I think so, I don't go there.
咁我自己嘅做法就係話，如果個文字嘅用字之間係冇一個咁樣嘅相似或者相同咧，我就唔會覺得兩者之間係有咩特別嘅關係。
And there are great tools to actually, even without Greek, there are great tools that can help you to see these connections.
好，就算我哋未曾學識希臘文，都有一啲嘅工具書會幫到我哋嘅。
For instance, there's a Greek New Testament called the Nestle Alant 28.
嗱，有一個希臘文嘅聖經就係叫
Nestle Alant 28.
Nestle Alant 28。
I would recommend you to buy it not because you read Greek.
嗱，你可以買，唔一定話因為你識希臘文。
But because in the margins of the New Testament, on the side, whenever there's shared language between the New Testament and the Old Testament, they show you the cross-reference. And these are scholars that do it.
因為有學者已經幫我哋編排咧，就係當新約聖經有引述舊約同樣嘅字眼嘅時候咧，喺個旁邊嗰度咧係會顯示出嚟。
So, with the case of Mark chapter 4, the language is so clear because it's only found in Mark 4 and in Jonah 1.
好啦，如果用翻正話馬可4章嘅時候咧，佢有引述到約拿書第1章嘅經文。
So first, there has to be shared language.
一定要有共通嘅語言。
Second, there has to be a shared plot. There needs to be a parallel storyline between the two
第二
passages.
個規矩就係嗰兩個故事各兩個片段咧，一定要係相似嘅。
Does that make sense? In other words, there has to be not just the shared language, but the story that both storylines need to be very similar.
即係話不單止係語文一樣，個故事亦都要係一樣。
And here's the third rule that I think is super, super duper important.
好，第三樣非常重要啦。
In the history of interpretation, has anybody else ever seen these stories related?
嗱喺我哋嘅詮釋當中，咁多人嘅詮釋當中，有冇人睇到呢兩個故事其實係有關聯嘅咧？
In other words, you want to use commentaries.
即係話你可以用釋經書啦。
New commentaries, old commentaries, Jewish commentaries.
不論係新約舊約或者係猶太嘅一啲嘅釋經書。
If you have discovered something in the Bible that nobody else in the history of interpretation has ever discovered, chances are you're crazy.
如果你揾到樣新嘢，從來冇其他學者揾過嘅咧，咁可能你都係搞錯咗㗎啦。
Does that make sense? In other words, we don't want to just use this to make the Bible say whatever we want.
係，因為我哋要小心，就唔能夠真係斷章取義咧，係將到聖經咧係曲解。
But in my experience, the problem among Christians is not that they see too much in the Bible. My experience is that they typically don't see enough.
不過多數即係信徒咧嘅情況就唔係話睇得太多兩樣係相關，反而咧係睇得太少啊。
Do you remember Magic Eye?
你哋知唔知有一種睇嘢方
In the 1990s, they had these posters that were 3D with all these pictures.
係大家唔知有冇玩過，係好似有立體感嘅一啲圖畫，你望落去可以見到有深度嘅。
Some of you were not born in 1993. I get it. I see you're looking, huh?
有啲太年輕啊，可能。
You don't even know what it means to dial a phone, right? You got the press.
打電話換個電話盤你都未見過㗎。
Right? So the Magic Eye, you had this. I'll never forget. It was all very popular when I was in college, and people said, "You got to look and stare in the picture." And I stared in the picture, and I didn't see anything.
大家如果玩過知佢講乜，因為我自己都睇過。啊，你如果喺某一個距離去睇個 Magic Eye 嘅圖案咧，突然之間咧係變咗係3D 嘅，係好見到一啲嘢咧係特別會光咗上嚟嘅嚇。
And I kept staring. I thought everyone was laughing at me and teasing me, and there was really nothing there.
啊，有啲人就可能笑我，因為我睇唔到裏邊究竟。人哋想我睇到嘅嘢。
And I remember one day looking at a picture and I'm thinking, I am not going to let go until I get that blessing. Like Jacob, I wasn't going to let go of this picture.
但係我好似學緊雅各咁樣，我捉住上帝，一定要上帝祝福我，一定要睇到個 Magic Eye 裏邊嗰個圖畫，我先至肯放手。
And I remember suddenly, out of nowhere, this whale appears before my eyes.
當一睇到嘅時候咧，個圖畫顯像可能就係當話有條鯨魚游埋嚟啊咁樣樣，立體感嘅。
And then I blinked.
咁我就眨眼。
And he dived down to the depths, and I never saw him again. But he was there. But the point is, I would never have looked at these pictures if I didn't know that there was something to look for.
嗱，但係個問題就係話，如果我唔知道係會睇到一啲嘢咧，我根本唔會嘗試去揾啊。
And I think many Christians don't see this because they're not aware that that's how the New Testament authors present Jesus.
所以亦都係好多信徒，當你睇新約嘅時候，我哋冇諗到原來喺舊約咧係有好多嘅背景咧，係新約嘅作者咧係故意係去使用，希望我哋睇到嘅。
But if you know that that's what they're doing, then you'll start to look for it.
啊，但係如果你知道新約作者嘅目的係咁樣樣咧，我哋就會故意蓄意去揾舊約一啲嘅平衡嘅段落啊嘛。
But of course you want to be responsible because you want author's intent. Not your creativity.
好啦，所以我哋要小心咧，就係話我哋要揾到作者嘅動機同埋用意，就唔係話自己好自由、好有創意咁樣係去解經。
An excellent, really fantastic question.
好，問題問得好好。
Other questions?
係，仲有冇問題咧？我哋仲有幾分鐘。We still have a few more minutes.
Yeah.
Yes. Hey.
Hey, Richard.
More about yoke and teaching.
Pardon?
The yoke and teaching.
The yoke and the teaching.
Yeah.
OK， 可唔可以講多啲嗰個軛同嗰個教導啊？大家可能要睇翻馬太11章嗰度啦。
Yeah. This is a very central passage in the Gospel of Matthew.
好喺馬太咧呢段經文係好重要嘅，係中心思想嚟嘅。
I would say this is the heart of the call to discipleship.
亦都可以話咧係我哋呼召作門徒咧呢個好核心嘅經文。
And what Jesus is doing is he's basically inviting anybody that wants to come to be his disciples.
耶穌就話：邊一個想跟從我嘅咧，你就要聽呢度。
His yoke, and we know this from the context, historical context too, yoke has to do with his teaching.
呢一個我哋睇到嘅歷史背景咧，就係耶穌所講呢個軛咧，就係同佢嘅舊約嘅教導係有關。
The rabbis used to speak about taking the yoke of the Torah upon you, the yoke of the commandments.
因為舊約嘅拉比咧就有講到摩西五經裏邊嘅軛其實就係摩西五經裏邊嘅教導。
We also know that this has to be his teaching because you see this says easy and light.
點解我哋話呢個軛其實就係講主耶穌嘅教導咧？因為有講到話係容易嘅，輕省嘅。
In Matthew 23, you have the opposite, that the Pharisees are giving you teaching that's burdensome and impossible to carry.
而我哋睇馬太23章咧，就見到相反嘅情形。就係法利賽人嘅教導咧，係難嘅，係好難真係跟從得到嘅。
And now, in the context, it's interesting. When he says that you will find rest, my teaching is easy, my teaching is light.
呢度講到話我嘅教導係容易同埋輕省咧，你係會得到安息嘅。
The following chapter actually helps us understand what he means.
咁我哋睇埋12章咧，我哋就明啦。
Because right afterwards in chapter 12, the disciples are plucking grains, heads of grain, and rubbing them in their hands on the Sabbath.
因為12章咧就講到門徒咧喺安息日嗰度咧係摘一啲麥穗嚟食。
And the Pharisees are there. They're violating the Sabbath.
咁法利賽人就指責嗰啲門徒話佢哋咧喺安息日嗰度咧係作工。
Not if you're a follower of Jesus.
但如果你係跟隨耶穌咧，你就冇呢一個嘅顧忌。
Then he goes into the synagogue and he says, "Is it okay to heal on the Sabbath?"
咁跟住咧，大家知道係去到喺一個嘅會堂裏邊咧，究竟喺安息日能否係治病咧？
And nobody answers, and he's grieved.
但係冇人能夠即係答得出。
Because the heavy yoke of the Pharisees had made it impossible to even heal on the Sabbath.
因為法利賽人嘅軛咧就係重到就話，就算有病嘅喺安息日都不能去治病。
Now, one thing I know about Hong Kong is people take their studies very seriously.
香港人咧讀書好勤力啊。
I'm thankful that my children are like Ling and not like me when it comes to studying.
咁好好彩啦！我啲仔女咧讀書咧都係似媽咪就唔係似我啊。
But it's interesting, you think about in Hong Kong how hard it is to get into the universities. There's only a few.
大家知道咧，香港入大學好難啊。
Right? And how hard you've got to work if you want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer. I mean, it's just really hard.
係啦，讀醫科啊、法律啊都係好辛苦㗎。
And then you have the great professors of the different fields and how hard it is to be able to get the best professor in the field of psychology or in the field of medicine.
或者你讀醫科啊、心理學啊，你想揾到最好嘅教授教你咧都唔容易。
And they only take the best students.
咁佢哋淨係揾咧最優秀嘅學生。
Well, this passage helps me very much.
咁所以呢段經文咧就幫咗我好多啦。
Because Jesus only picks tired, bad students.
因為耶穌咧淨係揀一啲最差嘅學生。
Right? Jesus says, you know what? Here's the condition. You want to come to me?
嗱，耶穌嘅條件就係話你跟隨我咧，你要有呢啲條件。
You got to be exhausted.
你一定要係好
tired of trying to please me and please God with man-made rules.
用好多人為嘅方法咧，想討好上帝，你都好失敗啦，好疲倦啦。
Sick of life and feeling far from God.
覺得上帝遠離你，你亦都對生命咧係覺得咧係好冷漠。
You're a bad student. You're my perfect disciple.
你係一個好差嘅學生，但係你可以作為我最好嘅門徒。
And interestingly enough, even here you see you will find rest for your souls. This is also a quotation of the Old Testament, God speaking.
嗱，呢個大草嗰度講到你會係心靈得到安息咧，亦都係舊約聖經出現嘅。
In Jeremiah, God says you'll find rest for your souls, but you didn't want it.
就係喺耶利米書出現。
And so the words of Jesus are the words of God in the Old Testament.
咁我哋睇到耶穌用嘅説話，亦都係舊約聖經嘅説話。
So one thing I will say that when he says easy,
我哋嘅軛係容易係咩意思咧？
That doesn't mean that the morality of Jesus is less than the morality of the Pharisees.
並不等於話耶穌所推廣嘅道德咧係次於或者係差過法利賽人嘅道德。
So, obviously look at the teaching of the Pharisees on divorce.
嗱，我哋如果睇法利賽人對於離婚嘅教導就明白啦。
If your wife burns the fish, you can divorce her.
因為用佢哋嘅講法就係你老婆煎魚煎燶咗咧，你可以休咗佢嘅。
Right? In the morality of the Pharisees, it was okay to look at a woman just so long as you didn't do anything physically.
而且咧，佢哋亦都容許你可以真係好用唔正常嘅眼光去睇個女人，只要你唔好真係有接觸咧，你就 OK 啦。
So in that sense, the morality that Jesus offers is actually an impossible morality.
所以耶穌所講嗰個道德嘅要求咧，其實係冇可能做得到嘅。
But that's a morality that actually leads us to the new covenant.
但係嗰個嘅道德嘅要求就係將我哋帶進新嘅約裏邊啦。
So this is an invitation to discipleship.
所以呢個就係呼召我哋作為門徒要跟從主。
And this is what we bring in the Great Commission. We go into all the world and make disciples, teaching them everything that Jesus taught.
而呢一個就係大使命裏面所講，凡我所吩咐你嘅，你都教導佢哋遵守。
So I think we're out of time, correct? Well, I've really enjoyed being with you, and I hope that you want to go home and read your Bibles.
希望大家返屋企勤讀聖經。
That's what I hope will happen.
希望大家可以咁做。
God bless.